41F. What does it mean for you? Hey guys, this is Dave with the Learning Firearms channel. Thanks for coming back and checking out this video. This is a continuation of our series where we're learning all about gun trusts with our special guest, Ben Rust, who is an attorney from the Twin Cities who specializes in gun trusts. Now, right now when we're making this video, it's first quarter 2016. And if you're into the shooting community, maybe you have a trust, maybe you're interested in NFA items, one of the things that you have no doubt heard about, or at least maybe you should have, is what's called 41P, 41F. Now we're going to be focusing on 41F because that's the final version of it. But what it is, what it means for you, and it's kind of this thing that has a lot of people, I think, maybe a little confused, maybe a little wondering what the good and bad are of this. So we're going to talk all about 41F. Now 41F takes in effect July of 2016. So if you're watching this after July of 2016, this applies. If you're watching it beforehand, you may have a little bit of time yet to file, but that window is closing, and I'd say it's closing quick because inventory is getting harder to get. It takes time to register things. It takes time to go through the process. So it's definitely real. It's definitely coming. We've already established that it's coming. There's nothing we can do there. But 41F has a few different facets. What's 41F?
41F, in the most literal sense, is a rule that the ATF has adopted that is going to change how folks obtain NFA, things like suppressors, short barrel rifles, machine guns, that sort of thing. What 41F did is changed 6 regulations in the Code of Federal Regulations. And the biggest change that it had is it created a new definition of a person called a responsible person. And the exact definition of what a responsible person means is still a little uncertain right now. The definition is about that long on a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. But what we think it means for sure is basically the grantor and settlor of the trust and every trustee of the trust who's serving while the grantor is alive. The rule specifically excludes beneficiaries of a trust from being responsible persons, but everything else is sort of up for grabs. There's some talk about whether or not you can create like a limited trustee who wouldn't be called a responsible person, but could still possess firearms without the grantor being with them.
Okay, so there's still a little bit of definition, just because this is new.
It's brand new.
That still have to be worked out a little bit, it sounds like. But I think we could probably agree that what is going to be a responsible person, that's the definition, is the grantor and the trustees who would probably on a normal basis have access or possession of the items in the trust.
Correct. I think if you operate on that assumption, you're probably going to be pretty safe. Whether or not we can create something more limited than that, so is still sort of up in the air.
Let's talk about how this affects the 2 different types of people that may be watching this. We have people that have trusts already, and we have people who don't. And for the people who don't, I don't know if they're going to have enough time to file before July.
Okay.
Maybe not, but if you already have a trust, let's say somebody has a trust, they maybe own a few items in that and they want to add to it, or maybe they're just wondering what they have to do from here. How does 41F affect them?
Basically what 41F does is, with the trust right now, you don't have to get fingerprinted, you don't have to get photographed, and you don't have to involve your chief law enforcement officer at all. 41F is going to change all of that. Now, every responsible person in a trust will have to be fingerprinted, every responsible person in a trust will have to be photographed, and you will have to notify your chief law enforcement officer, not get them to sign your form. So instead of asking them for permission, you are basically telling them that this is what I'm doing. This only applies to transfers of firearms. So the only time that you submit fingerprints and photos is when you are transferring a firearm into the trust. If you add more trustees and after all your transfers are completed or while you don't have a transfer pending, ATF does not need to know about that. It says so explicitly in the rule. So this only applies to people who are transferring a firearm after July 13th of 2016. How it would affect folks who have a trust right now? Basically, it won't affect you at all unless you want to do another transfer. If you want to do another transfer at that point, every responsible person in your trust will have to be fingerprinted and photographed. and submit those fingerprints and photographs to the police chief where the trust firearms are principally stored. So you're not going to have to send forms to 5 different police chiefs if you've got people in 5 different cities. It goes to one police chief or
where
sheriff.
The primary area.
The chief law enforcement officer. Yeah, sure. It's where the trust firearms are stored principally.
Yeah. So if you're watching some of this and you're kind of wondering, hey, where are all this chief and fingerprints and all this coming from? If you want to get an NFA item and you're doing so as an individual, right now you are required to submit fingerprints, a photograph, and obtain the chief law enforcement officer's signature. So that could be a sheriff, it could be a chief of police, it could be a prosecutor, a judge. There's actually acceptable definitions. So this is common in the NFA world. And up until now, up until 41F, a trust, a trust doesn't have fingerprints. You can't take a picture of it. Well, you could take a picture of the piece of paper.
Photocopy, I suppose, yeah.
But it didn't really apply. And some people were arguing that, the trust is the way to bypass a background. And that's just not true, because a member of the trust or, the grantor, when they would pick up that item that the trust purchased, we'd still have to do a background check. A dealer would still have to call in and do a background check on their 4473, the same background check that if they were picking up a firearm. But now 41F is changing that a little bit to include those responsible parties. But it's still, when we talk about it, that it's maybe not as easy as it was before, but it's not the end of the world. So I don't want people to think that it's a huge con. Oh no, I got to do that. It's not that bad. The fingerprints are easy. The photograph is a passport photo. Yeah. So it's not the end of the world. But for what people need to know, if they have a trust now and they're content on not adding anything to the trust, status quo.
Yep, nothing will change. The trustees that you have currently can continue to share firearms. If you don't add anything else to the trust, they'll never submit fingerprints or photographs. If you don't have a trust yet, it's not too late to get one. In fact, it may be the perfect time to get one if getting fingerprinted and photographed is something that you are not wild about going through. And like Dave said, it's not the end of the world, but there's people out there who would rather not. So the window to get NFA firearms without going through that is closing quickly. What ATF has said in the rule is that if your application is postmarked before the effective date of the rule, they will handle it or process that application as though it were being processed under the rule that exists right now in January of 2016. So what that means is you can form your trust right now. You can go out to someone like Dave or your friendly neighborhood gun shop and purchase your suppressor. As long as you get your paperwork in the mail before the rule takes effect July 13th, you're going to be processed under the current existing rule. So go out and buy 6, 8, why not 10 suppressors?
Why not? Baker's a dozen.
Yes, Dave could use the money.
I could.
Once you've purchased those silencers and the transfers are completed, if you want to add additional trustees after that, ATF has explicitly said that you do not need to submit fingerprints and photographs when you add those additional responsible people. If at any point after July 13th your trust is going to acquire another NFA firearm, a new application. Yep. You're buying another suppressor after July 13th. If they want to stay a trustee, they're going to have to submit fingerprints and photographs. Okay. And trustees can resign. If they won't cooperate, you can always fire them. But that's pretty much the status of things right now.
Yeah. Now you mentioned if a trustee doesn't want to go through that, because a common thing too for the reason why someone would go a trust route versus an individual is sometimes politics played a big part of this. There were certain sheriffs, people who lived in rural areas who were anti-gun, and they said if they had an individual application come across their desk, they would not sign it. They did not want to endorse that. So the alternative for those people in those areas was to create a trust. And then the trust could own that. It was a way for them to still exercise the legal rights, not break any laws, but bypassing that chief sign-off. So, where this kind of goes through, you mentioned if a trustee doesn't want to do that, one of the things about having a good gun trust is it'll have language in there allowing to revoke those things, the revocable living trust. And you might not get that, guys, if you just go and get a 1-800 trust or a Trust R Us. might not have those provisions.
Yeah, or if you have questions about how to do it,
Yeah.
are you going to be able to get a hold of them to answer those sort of questions?
Just for purposes, now let's just pretend, and maybe you're watching this after July, but now let's pretend it's after July, 41F is in effect. And we have a person, Mr. Smith, they want to get an NFA item, let's just say a suppressor. They've created a trust through you or a competent attorney. They call it the Smith Family Arsenal Trust. Who doesn't want a family armory, right?
Right.
Yeah, the whole arsenal. So they have this trust set up, and Mr. Smith is the grantor, Mrs. Smith is a trustee, and little baby Smith, although let's just say he's an adult, is the beneficiary. So now he comes to a dealer, he pays for the suppressor that's in stock. What does that process look like for someone now post 41F? What do they have to do?
Sure. They would come in the shop, they'd pay you, they would at that point fill out the Form 4, and they would need to get all of the responsible persons in their trust fingerprinted and photographed. They would first send that packet off to their chief law enforcement officer. Once they do that, they can then certify on the Form 4 that they've done that. They would send off Form 4s in duplicate, a copy of their trust, payment for $200 to the ATF, and Form 5320.23 for each responsible person, which will have a fingerprint card, a photograph of them that's less than a year old, and all of that will go in an envelope. You send that off and then start waiting.
So it's not really that much different for those that are already familiar with NFA. I mean, and I'll tell you, the thing about NFA guys is that they're kind of like Pringles, okay, or potato chips or French fries or whatever. You really can't just have one. Okay, it's pretty tough. Some people do it great, but a lot of us don't.
They have willpower.
So God bless them. Well, actually, no. I want you to not have willpower. As a dealer, I would love it for people to buy a bunch. But as far as pros, cons, I think the only real pro of 41F is for individuals. Now it's no longer a chief law enforcement officer signature. It's also a notification.
Correct. They've changed from the certification to a notification. So you're not asking, you're telling them. You're not asking them if I can do this. You're telling them I'm going to do this, and there's,
and there's no political things that they can exercise then, which is kind of nice too.
Yeah, they've removed an obstacle. Really the biggest obstacle to getting an NFA firearm as an individual has been removed.
Yeah, so that's a pro for 41F, even though a lot of people are thinking of 41F as the negative because it has all this other stuff in there for trust with responsible parties. But, it's coming. It is what it is. We can complain about it. You can do whatever, but it's here. And we're going to have to, move forward with it. Anything else do you think we should know about 41F?
There's one other change. The ATF has, before it was sort of unwritten rule that anyone who is handling the estate of someone who owned firearms that weren't in a trust could legally possess those firearms. It wasn't explicitly said anywhere. ATF has actually come out and explicitly said that the personal representative of your probate estate or whatever the equivalent is in your state can legally possess the firearms for as long as it takes to transfer those. They want the transfer to happen before probate's closed, but they've come out and explicitly said that whoever's handling your estate after your death can legally possess those firearms.
So that's a good thing.
That's a good thing. They've clarified the rule. Yeah.
Nice. Well, guys, we've learned a lot about 41F, and for more information, you have a blog.
I do.
What is the blog?
It's at minnesotaguntrustlawyer.com, and just click the blog on the upper right corner.
So we'll put a link in the description below, but that's minnesotaguntrustlawyer.com. Now, again, Ben specializes in Minnesota trusts. So if you're in Minnesota, you're looking for a trust or have questions, and that's the beauty of going to a lawyer for your trust, is that when you have questions, you establish a relationship with that lawyer so you can ask some of the basic questions too. With the 1-800 or the Trusts Are Us, you just don't get that. So please check out his webpage. Even if you're not in Minnesota, this blog may be very helpful to you. There's also other resources on there that you may find helpful. But it is encouraged, highly encouraged for you to find a lawyer in your area to ask some of these questions to and develop your trust. But we hope you guys find this series helpful. Today we talked about 41F. In our first video, we kind of just talked about Trust 101, and we have other videos coming up as well that we hope will be helpful to you. Thank you guys very much for watching. Have a great day.